Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Do you dream of starting your very own podcast in 2024? Well, have I got exciting news for you. Black Friday is just around the corner and I've got a special offer you won't want to miss. Introducing my Black Friday deal on my core group program, Start Your Podcast. You asked, I listened, and for the first time ever, I'm offering a 5-payment plan option, making it more affordable than ever for you to join me in this podcasting journey. But that's not all. You will have the freedom to choose from 2 start dates in early 2024, ensuring that Start Your Podcast fits perfectly into your schedule. This is your opportunity to turn your podcasting dreams into reality. Don't miss this fantastic opportunity. Be sure to join my waitlist now to get early access to this exclusive Black Friday deal. Visit donnaeid.com/Black Friday 23. That's Black Friday lowercase or one word and the number 23. The waitlist is filling up fast and there are limited spots available, so get in quick. Get ready to make your podcasting dreams come true in 2024. Stay tuned for Black Friday when this incredible deal goes live. Get on the waitlist today at donnaeid.com/Black Friday 23. You're listening to the Mindset and Action podcast, bringing you the map to grow and streamline your business in 2023. I'm your host, Donna Eid, your go-to gal for all things podcasting, planning and productivity. And I'll be bringing you all that plus mindset goodness from experts with knowledge to share. Let's make 2023 the year of success in your business. Business without a path to profit isn't a business, it's a hobby. Jason Fried. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here today because I have a guest with me, and you know those are always my favorite episodes. So Stephanie, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Okay, so guys, Stephanie and I have actually worked together previously. If you know me from old, she is the lady who actually created my Society of Professional Wedding Vendors logo. And I still love that logo. And I'm so sad that it doesn't work for my business anymore. But, you know, that aside, that is where we connected all those years ago now. And so we've brought Stephanie on for, this is the first time you've come on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So for the first time,
we made all these changes in our business and now kind of really align again.
Yeah, that is so true. So we've both been through some major changes in the last few years, and it's just worked out that this topic is something that we can both talk to on an episode. So welcome to the podcast. Let everybody know a little bit about your background. So who you are, what it is that you do, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so, well, you basically already said it. I was a brand and website designer. Not anymore. Right now, I coach brand and website designers. As I was coming from quite a corporate background when I started my business in brand and website design, because I really didn't want to be behind spreadsheets anymore all day as a business analyst and pricing manager. I really wanted to do something creative again. So I started my business as a brand and website designer, but I was quickly noticing how many of the creatives that I was working with were trying to solve problems in their business with a new website or branding, while actually there was so much more going on where just a new website was not going to solve that problem. And I thought, oh, I can actually help here. I have experience in managing departments, financial plans, action plans, lead generation plans. I think I can really help. And that's how I started transitioning from website and brand design to offering some mentoring to over the years really just focusing on coaching and which better industry than designers to help from my own experience. So that's what I do now. And I mostly work with established brand and website designers, but that are overwhelmed. They are really confident in their creative abilities, but they are doubting themselves when it comes to the business side of running their design studio and feeling like their business is really running them. And that's where I kind of come in and help them build those foundations for their business so that it is profitable. That's one of my keywords. So we have a really good topic here today. and sustainable, not sitting behind your desk 60 hours a week, but a sustainable business that's also profitable.
So that's fantastic. I absolutely love that. And I love your journey, because I've been on a similar journey where, you know, I started out in the wedding industry, absolutely love the wedding industry, still love the wedding industry, but podcasting is what I started doing as I was in that. And now that's where I'm at with my business as well. So I love that we've both had that kind of change go on. And profitability is something that I am so pleased to be having a conversation about, because I don't think we've really done anything on profitability per se on the podcast before. I've talked the hind legs of a fat donkey on, and I don't even know what saying that was completely messed up. But I have talked about making sure that you are profitable, making sure that you've got multiple income streams to protect your business. But profitability itself, we haven't really dived into much. So I'm really excited to jump into it today with you. And I wanted to start off with talking about something that I feel is something a lot of people are getting overwhelmed by. And that is the fact that we see all the time people turn around saying, oh, you can have a 6-figure business, you go from 6 to 7 figures. You know, I'd just like to get to good 5-figure months would be nice. Like, I'm just like, it's all of this money. Yeah. And what people don't often realize is that when people are throwing out these numbers, it's usually their gross revenue that they're talking about and not their profit. So it's no good turning around and saying, oh, yes, I made, 3 million last year, if you then spent 2.9 million on ads.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So it's one of those things that I don't think anybody is really talking about. So can you explain the difference between gross net revenue and where profitability fits in with all of that jazz?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's really disheartening when you are in the early stages of your business and you want to make more money and you see these numbers being thrown out there and you're like, but that's what I want. And just not getting the behind the scenes of what actually comes with making these kinds of numbers. So I completely agree with you there. So when looking at the profitability, the traditional calculation is revenue minus expenses is profit. If you follow profit first method, what a lot of business owners do, you take a percentage of revenue that came in from all the revenue that came in, you take a percentage from that, and that is your profit. And that sounds quite simple. Take your revenue, take your costs off, that's your profit. But I think especially when we're looking at these bigger number coaches or other industry leaders, what you really need to look at with those big numbers is that most of the time you need to deduct half of it. They will probably have teams, they will run ads. And I saw a really good example of someone who is making these kinds of numbers. And she was giving as an example that in a certain month, she made 50,000. That's a huge number. Her cost for that month was 19,000. 7,500 in ads. Then a lot of the rest of the expenses came from team members and paying them. But that's before taxes. If you then also take the taxes off, of course, percentage changes per country. But let's say 20% from 50,000 with 19K in cost. That leaves you 25 to 26,000. Still a really good number, for a monthly income, but that's half. And I think that's a really good guideline to kind of have. If you look at revenue, take off half, and that might be the number that you actually take home.
I love the way that you looked at that, saying that, take off half of these big numbers. And I know that Amy Porterfield has spoken on her podcast about how she likes to keep, I think it's her costs down, like she's trying to get them under 40%.
Yeah.
So that is what she works with. And I think
that's usually with a bigger team. If it's just you, 30% could actually already work in terms of cost percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to say, because she does the 40. No, absolutely. It just makes it better that you are agreeing. So for me, I always do 30%.
Yeah.
Because I break my money into thirds.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, a third is business costs, a third goes to the tax man, and then a third I get to keep. And that's how I kind of see it in my head. So even though the numbers aren't always necessarily going to match those percentages, I know that that's kind of what I'm working with on average.
You have the guidelines at least there that you're knowing what you're aiming for. And indeed, each month will look a little bit different. If you have monthly subscriptions versus yearly subscriptions, yes, some months will look different. But if you at least over the big picture have that guideline to kind of work towards, I think that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when we are looking at our profit, we kind of know what the difference between revenue and profit is. We can relax a bit when we see these huge figures being brought out because we don't know how much they're spending on their advertising. And I know, well, some cases we do. I know Amy has said now before that she spent over 200,000 on ads in certain launches and stuff. So there are some numbers floating about out there.
Some spend thousands a day.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I'm just always like, wow, how did you get to the point where you could spend that kind of, because obviously if you're spending that kind of money on ads, then you've got to be getting a good return on that. Like if it's 200,000 and it's costing you $1 per lead, then that's 200,000 leads you just got in. So that's like insane. And the conversion rates, you know, when you're looking at conversion rates, that's when they come into play, is when you're playing with those big numbers. If you are a very small business,
having to sell something after having spent the ad money, there needs to be something there to cover the ad spend in order bumps or upsells or other products that are kind of behind that initial investment.
Yeah, exactly. So it's always a bit smoke and mirrors sometimes. And it's nice to sort of pull back the curtain and say, hey, no. And especially as a small business owner, you might have actually a better conversion rate than that.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're actually doing the one-to-one conversations with people and you're actually getting in there. So and it's all numbers. When you think of conversion rate, it's always percentages. Well, a percentage could say, I'm just in the middle of an affiliate launch right now, and I have got a 25% conversion rate. Sounds amazing, right?
Sounds good.
25% conversion rate from a lead to a sale. That's insane. But when you've only got like 8 people that are your leads, actually, that's 2 people.
The full picture.
It doesn't give the full picture. So it is really important that we kind of take all of this in with a little bit of, you know, a little bit of salt, a little bit of a sprinkle, and just like take the overarching thing that they're saying rather than listening to those numbers and get swept up in the idea that you can suddenly make this kind of money if you do X, Y, and Z, because it's not necessarily going to happen that way. But
exactly.
That being said,
I mean, that can be a whole other topic of, indeed, this is how I do it, and I'll teach you the exact same steps so that you can replicate. I have an opinion about that, but that's a whole other topic.
Sticking to profitability then, when we are talking about pricing ourselves, so obviously when you are pricing yourself, this is going to be the key to working out how profitable you're going to be, because if you price yourself too low, then you're not going to be able to cover your expenses. If you price yourself too high, then you're not going to be able to get the customers in. And I think a lot of the times people choose numbers and they're just sort of picking them out of the air and just going, oh, that's what so-and-so is charging, I'll charge that.
Absolutely.
What are your suggestions for how people can actually sort of sit down and work out what is going to be a good price point for them, for their product or service, and what they should consider when we're doing that pricing?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly saying it right. I think pricing is often looked at in a vacuum. It's just looking at pricing, looking at what others are doing, and then doing something similar because it seems to make sense for the person you're looking at. Often someone you admire who's doing something similar. And while competitor pricing has a place in looking at your pricing, indeed, because you don't want to be too cheap, that opens you up for a lot of comparison. I feel you always need to start with you. What is your personal situation? So no arbitrary goals, aiming for 6 figures because you feel that somehow the holy grail, not aiming for a random number because you feel that's where you should be by now. What do you need for your business? As in, how much do you need to cover the cost for your business for a full year? Having set money aside for taxes, we just have to pay them. We need to consider them. I always like to have a little bit of money left as well for investments, because oftentimes you need support in your business, but you don't actually have the money there to make the investments. And then also, what does your contribution need to be to your family's expenses? That's how I like to look at it. That is your base. That is where revenue targets come from. Of course, there can be a gap between what that number is and where you are right now, but that's where an action plan comes in. But I like to look at what is that yearly income goal that you're having. Make sure that it's realistic, because of the huge gap that there can be indeed between where you are now and where you really want to go. And often, if you need to make huge jumps in that, there's a lot that needs to happen in your business. Maybe you need to invest in education. Maybe you need to create products, courses, whatever it looks like. That takes time. You need to have the audience to sell these things to. So be realistic in those revenue targets, but also consider your time. And that's something I don't see often, that when it comes to pricing, that we're actually talking about time. But even if you know your revenue target, how many hours do you work per week? How many weeks do you work in a year? We need to know in how much time we have to actually accomplish that revenue target. How many hours does it take you to complete a project? Because you can say, I want to make 5 figures each month, but if that means you need to complete 10 projects, but actually you only have time for 5, you're just setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah.
So look at that time consideration as well, and include a profit margin. I think we often look at the profitability of a business, but I feel all of your packages should also be profitable. So if you look at your pricing, take off the number of hours that you spend to complete it, and then add a profit margin into it, because you also need to get paid for those hours that you work to get the business in, to create the content. You need to be compensated for those hours and not just for the actual work. So these are a lot of the factors I think you should include in your pricing. I mean, it depends a little bit in your pricing will always be changing as your business is growing, but these are the minimal things I feel you should look at.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's one of those things that I would say to wedding people when I was doing the wedding stuff, as a wedding photographer, especially. The number of wedding photographers that are undercharging is insane, because when you break down the number of hours, just thinking about generally just hours and nothing else, when you break down how much they're paying.
And especially the wedding photography, it's completely different versus family photography.
Yeah.
Because of those long lead times. I've worked with a couple of photographers. Yeah, no, absolutely.
This is it. It's like, if you take into account everything, your first initial meeting, your emails to the client, venue visits, if you do that, and then the engagement shoot, if you do that, the editing time for that, etc., up to the wedding day, then the wedding day. It's so much time. And then when you actually break it down, you're making less than minimum wage. And then it's like, why are you running a business? Why don't you just go back to a job that's going to pay you for that? And you haven't got any of the stress of running a business. So it's really important, if you want to be in it for the long haul, that you get your profit right. So I love that.
Yeah. And I think this is also a really good example that often is looked at, what is the highest thing we can sell? But if you break that down indeed into profitability for a wedding photographer versus a photographer who does mini sessions or family sessions, that whole number of hours that you spend, even though the pricing is low, that could actually turn out to be more profitable than a big wedding.
Absolutely. So we've talked about this, looking at what we consider when it's the business costs and things like that. We need to consider that when we're looking at our profit. But I think a lot of times people forget to add stuff in. So are there any sort of areas that you see business owners regularly forgetting to add in those costs when they're factoring it in for their profit margin? I'd love to know.
Actually, the thing that I see often already starts before that, not knowing total costs in general. A lot of business owners, and especially when it comes to the creative industries, these are really creative. Things like spreadsheet numbers is really scary, is really overwhelming. So I actually see that a lot of business owners don't know the cost that they actually have over a full year, what they need to cover. But before you can make any changes to your business financial situation, you need to know where you stand now. So that's kind of where it starts. Another thing is that evaluating those costs. So are you paying for a really large tech stack for programs that you don't even use or don't use anymore or hardly use, where you can take costs out to get to that 30% of cost as we talked about earlier? And then it's really not considering that time, because the way we run our businesses, we don't have huge overheads. We don't have office buildings that take up a lot of the cost, but we still need to consider that time. That is what we need to be compensated for. Yeah. So I don't really have like one specific thing that they miss in terms of a certain cost, but it really starts from knowing the cost at all, evaluating them, and not forgetting to consider your time.
I think that is probably the biggest one, to be fair. It's like, you know that you pay for Zoom, you know that you pay for your website, you know that you pay. This is all money that you're paying out. Yeah. But when you are in business, you just take out the profit, whatever that is, that's your money. And you don't look at it as paying for your time and what that actually costs you. Yeah. So I think it's really underrated when it comes to working out your profitability.
Yeah, and especially when you look at that standard calculation, revenue minus cost, you might look at your bank account and think, oh, I have profit left. But if you are not pricing your packages right, it could be that you're really making a loss on individual packages. So that's also something to be looked at, considering that those timeframes and not just the overall profitability.
Yeah. And the time factor is just crazy, because just as you were saying that, I'm sitting there thinking, and actually, yeah, okay, so you've taken your business costs out, taken your tax out, and this is your profit. And you think, oh, that's pretty good. And then when you actually work out how many hours you've worked and you divide that, you realize that you've made actually not
your
a lot.
Hourly rate is 10.
Yeah. And like, how crazy would that be? Because that's less than you would get if you went to a regular job and just did a regular job. So even if you're profitable, if that is not compensating you for your time effectively, then what that can lead to, and this is something that's really important to hear, guys, is what that can lead to is burnout.
Absolutely.
What that can lead to is you hating what you're doing and feeling begrudged about it and not even realizing why, because you're like, well, I'm profitable and I'm paying my bills and everything else. Why am I so exhausted? Because the amount of work.
Or sometimes resenting clients if they don't pay a lot, and they somehow, it always seems to be the clients that don't pay a lot that ask a lot of questions, take up a lot of your time. So you can start resenting your clients. And even though money is coming in, when you don't have that overview of what you need to make, what your contribution is to your family, when you don't consider that you need to keep money in your business for taxes, for investments, so often what I see happening is that money that comes in from a client directly goes into the personal bank account because invoices need to be paid there, which then leads to that you're constantly running after yourself in your business, needing to make more money because the bills, your next website subscription comes up and your Zoom subscription comes up, and then not having money in your business to actually invest. While it can help you make so many leaps forward, but there's no money left to actually do that.
So true. So true. It's crazy. So can you give us a little bit of a summary of what we need to consider when we're looking to make our business profitable? So a little roundup for us so that we can sort of take some action steps away.
Yeah. So first, know your numbers. Know how much revenue is coming in, because that's the same. It's not just that some businesses don't know their cost. They also don't know how much revenue they're making. And I think it's also very important to know which services are contributing most to your business, because that also impacts your marketing. The thing that helps you bring in most of the revenue should get most of your marketing attention, because it's making the biggest impact. So knowing your revenue numbers, looking at how can you increase your revenue by either increasing your pricing, if you have to, improving conversion rates, what we talked about earlier, potential upselling, and client retention. That's very easy things to increase your revenue, especially without taking on more clients. What can you offer additionally, and what can you do in your processes so clients stick around longer?
And
so
that
that's
is
kind of from
great.
The revenue side.
Yeah.
Of course, making sure that your packages are aligning with your target market, that your pricing also makes sense for the target market that you're having. But often businesses don't see this as a connection from what your initial target revenue is all the way to how you are marketing yourself, what your positioning is, how you are spending your marketing. Businesses don't see that connection, how everything flows from that revenue target. And I think that's that. Yeah, I see it constantly. There's no connection in what we're doing with that. We're just looking at elements individually and not seeing that red thread, how one thing literally impacts to what you're seeing on Instagram. So that's a very important one. Then obviously the cost, knowing how much cost you have and making sure that you're not paying for things you don't have to. Looking at the profitability overall of the business, looking at the profitability of the individual services, and really making sure that you are considering your time. How many hours do you have each week to make the money? Do you still have time left to work on your business? Because it's not just client work. You also need to have time in your business to work on those business tasks that will help you to move forward. So it's really revenue, cost, time, and productivity, because it's not just this is the time I'm spending now on a project. What can you do differently to increase your productivity, your efficiency, solid processes? Can you use systems like Dipsado, Honeybook, ClickUp, Asana to make those processes even more efficient?
Okay, that was fabulous. Thank you so much for that. And on that point of, making yourself more efficient and saving time with your processes, I think you have got some email templates that we can get our hands on. Tell us a little bit more about them and where we can grab them.
Exactly. Yeah. So I created 10 email templates that can really help you streamline your whole process, from kickstarting conversations with new inquiries to sending out proposals and asking for feedback for those really important testimonials. So this is a free resource that includes 10 of these templates, and you can find them on flourishonlinemanagement.com/free resources.
Fabulous. So I will link that in the show notes for you guys so that you can head straight there, because, spelling is a thing. I swear to God, I would totally spell that wrong if I tried to put it in. So I'll make sure that the link is right and correct and available for you in the show notes of this episode. So make sure you head over and grab that once we've finished up here. But before we finish up, before we go, I have got 3 questions I love to ask my guests, because I like to get to know you all a little bit more. And I know we know each other a little bit better than most of my guests, but I would still love to ask you these questions. Yeah. So are you up for that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what is the book that has changed your life the most up to this point?
The book that kind of kicked off my journey of starting my own business, even though it looks completely different, The 4-Hour Workweek from Tim Ferriss.
Yes, I love him.
My business is completely different, but it kind of showed me what was possible.
I love that. Brilliant book, brilliant author. He's a great guy. So I love that one. Yes. And what's your go-to snack if you're in a hurry?
I don't really snack much, to be honest. I generally make sure none of that is in the house. But if it's at the end of the day and it's not just yet dinner time, I'll grab a handful of pretzels.
Love that. No, do you know what? I've not had anybody say I don't actually do snacking. And I'm not a big snacker, actually. I don't tend to snack between meals, but after dinner, I will have my dark chocolate.
Oh,
that's my go-to.
That's the thing that I try not to have in the house, because if I have it, I know it will be gone.
Oh, you see, I find it too rich. I never used to like dark chocolate, and I'll probably talk about this on another podcast and go into details, but I didn't like
Cadbury's fruit and nuts.
Yeah, I could eat a whole bar of Galaxy. If it was milk chocolate, it would be gone. But dark chocolate, I don't have the palate to be able to handle too much of it. So 2 squares is enough dark chocolate to satisfy me. So that's why I have it, because otherwise I would be eating loads of I don't have that in the house. Oh dear. So not a big snacker, but we'll have a handful of pretzels to tide you over till dinner. Love that. And then what is your ultimate me time thing that you enjoy doing?
Well, I live in Scotland, so it's a little bit weather dependent. If it's good weather, I love being in the garden. I started growing vegetables this year, so I just love pondering around there. If it's bad weather, reading. That's just really in-house reading. If I can travel, you'll find me somewhere in Africa going on safari.
Love that. And you have got an amazing bookshelf behind you, I see, as well.
It's
so
only
she's
one
not
of
lying.
3 sections that I have.
Yeah, I've got 2 bookshelves like that. It might be a bit wider, that sit either side of my chimney in my dining room that are stuff. Well, I've recently gone through them and gone, okay, I'm not going to read that one again, and I don't need to keep that one, because I was just like, they are so stuffed to the brim. It was making me feel claustrophobic.
I had so many. Moving houses helps.
Yes.
with cleaning up.
Yeah, I don't want to have to move to read.
Yeah. My books are always so many boxes when we're moving, so I really had to reduce down.
Hair down. Oh dear. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Stephanie. It's been a fantastic conversation. Hopefully this means that many more people are going to look at their pricing in the future and price for profitability. Lovely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Stephanie all about profitability in your business. Do not forget to head to the show notes to grab your free email templates. They are going to be listed in the show notes. If you are on Apple, you can access them there. If not, go over to my website, donnaeade.com/podcasts, and you will be able to find this title within the podcast list there and access the show notes. So that is it for today, guys. I will see you on the podcast next week. Bye for now. Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.